Hi there, I'm Shayne Fox, founder and designer of Shayne Fox Hardware and production designer of What We Do in the Shadows, and you're watching A Student's Perspective.
Hi everyone, I'm Courtney, and this is another episode of A Student's Perspective. Today I'm with Shayne Fox, and if you like our conversation today, feel free to like, share, and post any comments or questions in the comment section below. So, hi Shayne, thank you so much for meeting with us today.
Hi.
We're so excited to have you. Can you just give us a little peek into your background a little bit?
For sure. Well, I've been making and creating things and part of creative processes pretty much my whole life. I've always been attracted to working with materials and pushing things. And since I was a little kid, my mom always told me that was, when they asked me when I was little what I wanted to be when I grew up, my answer was I just want to make things, and that's kind of come true. In terms of art studies, I studied fine art at the University of British Columbia. I then went to do practical, sort of hands-on art in a small college in the interior of British Columbia, which is like way out west in Canada. Um, and then from there, I started working in TV. When I was a teenager, I would go to school during the year, and then the summers I picked up work in film, and I started working in puppet shops, building puppets for kids' TV shows, like with the Henson people doing the Henson style foam and fleece puppets. So TV kind of took over my life, and I'm still working in television. And um, I guess when you do contract work, like I was doing for so many years, um, often the contract ends and then paychecks stop, and you're kind of left wondering, like, what, I'm not building anything. That's what my fear was. I'm not building anything that was my own. I was always just waiting for the next contract and the next gig. So that's when I started Shayne Fox Hardware. Was like, okay, I can do this on the side. I can design and manufacture products that I think are cool, that I want to see out in the marketplace, that I think are not available, and it's my company, and it will grow on its own, and that's exactly what has happened. So now this little side hustle is kind of taken over, and it's more of like a front and center hustle, and now I'm trying to toggle my film career and my hardware career at the same time. So that's the short story.
That's so exciting, though. I'm so happy to hear that, you essentially turned, something that you were kind of viewing as like a hobby, I guess, maybe,
Yeah.
in the beginning at least, and then kind of just really pursued that as a career. And then, even when you found a different avenue to go through, you didn't give that up, and you still interpreted that into your career, whether it was film with hardware associated with it or vice versa. So I just think that's so interesting, especially to see how different areas of the field can definitely work together.
Mm-hmm.
um I'm really interested to know what your design process looks like within the film and set industry,
Oh.
specifically, because I'm doing a collaborative process here at Marywood, and it's between the interior architecture department and the theater department.
Mm-hmm.
So working with them to build their set, and I was just thinking about how your process with film and TV and all of that kind of, where do you even begin? You know what I mean?
Good question. Usually it begins with a script or with an outline, a storyline, or sometimes if the script isn't ready, then we have like a basic outline of the hopes and dreams for the production. Um, it's a collaborative thing. You know, there are so many people and parts involved, and you really have to. There are different people who are head up different sections of it, and those you have to work really closely with those people to create a cohesive vision. You know, so that it's something that is a thought is now come to life and is being shot and used and so really it starts with the story. Like, do you have a script, or is it what are you guys? What kind of a production are you doing?
Yeah, so it's actually the fall play. The fall play
Okay.
production. Yeah. So and I think it's been really interesting following that sort of dynamic too, because we start with the script and you kind of read it and conceptualize everything.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't know, the logistics of really how it all unfolds because I've never had this experience before.
Right.
And I was so excited to speak with you and see how like different maybe, one set maybe from another, and how like is the process, is there like a similar process that you kind of go through, like a basis that you kind of work off of, or if it's super tailored to the specifics of each individual one.
Sometimes it can be as simple as a pencil drawing on a piece of paper that someone throws out there and everyone reacts to and jives with and they want to build on that. Or sometimes they're really intricate CAD drawings that have multiple views and then get turned out into floor plans and layouts and elevations and you know so there's the whole gamut, and you can take the simplest idea and then build from that. That you as a set designer, you can say, okay, I want this cave-like space, and then you talk to the director of photography or the lighting guys, and they can say, well, yeah, let's put some shafts of light, and what's the logic of that? If it's underground, how does that work? Where's the light coming from? Is it moonlight? Is it daylight? Does that make sense? Or do we even have to explain that part of it? So then the lighting people weigh in, and it's like, well, if it's so dark, are we going to see their faces? And then how do we get the actors lit? And then it's all these things. It's the process. So you just need talented people with creative ideas who are not going to let their egos get in the way, and everybody can sort of jam it out, and sometimes magic happens.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, something too that you mentioned is just the whole collaborative process and really trusting others that, you're all going to work together to get the job done and really make it as
Yeah.
successful as possible too. Because, I think something that happens, probably not as frequently as we think, but I mean, it does happen is where, you collaborate with others and there's a time where, you might be so excited with lighting or just materiality or costumes and that sort of respect. And, maybe that's not exactly where your focus is, but you find yourself driven in that direction. So like, have you ever had that sort of situation where, you were there to kind of drive the set design itself, but you found yourself really, really into, the lighting aspect of it? And like, how did you kind of work to really get all of your ideas out there and collaborate?
I think that having done it for a while, I know what my role is and I know what I can push, and I know how to creatively work within the boundaries of that, and I know to trust the lighting guys and not to step on their toes. And if I have a lighting idea, or if I have something that I want to offer, I will show them, like, look at this cool fixture, look at these really crazy light bulbs. Will it work on camera? Or, we kind of there's only so much that I can push other departments. You know what I mean? Like, that's why you got to let the professionals do their job, and hopefully you guys get along. And it's different at a student level, I guess. Also, as professionals, we have years of projects to pull from. Like, oh, on that show we did this worked, and we tried that on that show and it didn't work, or want to try that again. But as a student, you probably have someone who's heading up the team with you, right? Like someone who's been around theater or production. So you got to rely on their technical input, I guess, to help steer you, because there's a creativity without any reference or any sort of, what's the word, experience. It's kind of hard to harness it and to bring it into a place where the product is good.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think something too that you mentioned was like the time frame of everything. So you are working on these for such a long time. And I
Mhm.
wonder because even I think there's a point in everybody's, projects, whether it's, on a school-based level or, just I guess maybe like going from like a school, maybe semester long project and working more in the professional field where, you're working on these projects for like years, you know what I mean? Sometimes. So how do you kind of keep the momentum going and really spark your interest within it? Because I feel like a lot of students, they kind of get a little bit burnt out at a point, and they kind of feel like they need to, just completely take a step back from their project or work on something new and then come back to it. Like what does that kind of look like within your
I think you
professional?
have to love what you do, you know?
Mm-hmm.
You have to love it. Like you have to love the adrenaline rush and you have to love all the planning and talking and then finally standing back and be like, oh my God, look what we did. Like that feeling is so cool. And then have it resonate with an audience, and then have like fans reach out to you and ask you questions about it and have it be recognized by like our most esteemed academies and awards. Like that's really cool, like
Yeah.
exhausting and grueling, and some days are relentless. Like on the show I'm on right now, um, what we do in the shadows, we shoot at night. So that means our call time is 5 p.m. sometimes, right? So like
Yeah.
I'm on the shoot crew, but the shoot crew is shooting all night long. But I do get calls from a set at midnight saying, "Oh my God, the chair broke," or whatever. You kind of have to love it, and if you don't love it, then it's gonna show in your work. That's the
Yeah.
thing. Like it's it's a tough business and the hours are grueling and it's physically demanding and mentally demanding, and if you don't love it you're not going to do well.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
perspective, like it's just like anything else, right? You will succeed, you will have success if your heart is in it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree 100%. And I think something that I wanted to kind of shift gears on is talking about the materiality aspect of it too. So, and maybe even the construction aspect of it, right? So, thinking about like if you do you have like a specific technique or, process that you go through when creating the sets themselves. So say like once you have your concept, then do you move into a certain like materiality aspect of it, and then you go into because I know we talked about leaving certain aspects of it to the professionals, whether it's lighting, whether it is materials and all that, but do you kind of go through the entire process for yourself and kind of really like hone into different aspects just to get your mind wrapped around the full extent, or do you kind of go back and forth with one another and really just interpret theirs and then react to what somebody else might be collaborating with?
And so when you say materiality, you're talking about the actual substrates that we build the sets and dress them with.
Yes.
So in film, if we're building a set in studio, usually it's just plywood and jacks on the back and, windows, and the materials are like everyday things that we use in construction. It's just, I can put a sconce on the wall just by poking a hole through the wall and hanging the sconce, and the lighting guys come and wire it. There's standard materials that we use. Um, on every show there's a different look aesthetic, so those that dictates what materials we use there. So on our show, what we do in the shadows, it's a vampire show, so we do a lot of heavy curtains and like peeling wallpapers, and there are like a million paint techniques that the scenic team use to like create crumbling walls. It looks like mold but it's not. So there's a whole roster of it's a palette that we basically come up with for the show that we repeat or use in different areas that as needed, and sometimes we go out into the real world and just shoot on location, and that's part of the story too, where we just shoot what we see and embrace it. So every show is different. There are standard materials that we use in production, but every episode, every show, every script, every production will have a different established palette or um, materials that they pull from. Does
Yeah.
that help? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because I guess my next question, or what I wanted to talk about next would be that idea of having So, for example, I know you worked on the Bold Type, that show, and taking maybe that or even the one that you just talked about, and you say, okay, we just read the script. The script is, we understand everything, the concepts, what we want to kind of achieve. Is
Mhm.
there a sort of basis to the set? Like, do you sort of implement as you go, or is there always like everything is always going to be as is, but you're going to just rearrange and change as you go? Does that sort of make
I
sense?
think it's ever evolving, the like for the Bold Type, I did the pilot, so we established the look for the show, and then another team took over for the show. We worked with production, like with the writer, the head writer who dreamt up the story. Her vision was pretty clear of how she wanted the offices to feel and how it, what level of high end, how sexy it was supposed to be, so that was kind of established, and we come in and just find what we can to fill that world out, and within the budget, within the time frame, at the specific location. um, it took us a while to get it right, but we got it, and the pilot was shot. I don't think a lot of the stuff we shot in the pilot made it into the series, or maybe it did. I think it did. Some of it did. um, but like that's what I say, it comes from the concept, like the showrunner and the executive producers and the network too. Like that's an NBC show, and they have a certain aesthetic. You wouldn't really think that, but when you start working within it, you sort of get to know what the NBC look is. It's kind of slick, it's kind of girls in high heels, and everybody's kind of sexy, and you know what I mean. Like they love that. So
Yeah.
that's how we get the information and the inspiration, and then we go from there. We pick colors, and we pick a palette, like I say, and pick materials that are going to work. Like sometimes we want things that are reflective so we can see people in the background, or sometimes we don't want things that are reflective, so we want to block it off. There's so many cues that we take. Like, yes,
Yeah.
we have creative freedom, but a lot of the times it's very pinpointed for us, the direction that we are assumed to go in. If that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talked a little bit about like the cues, so do you ever think about, your set design as this is written in the script, so we have to create a space that allows for this specific moment, or is it more of just getting the conceptual space going and then having, the characters have the freedom to walk around and interact in that way? Because I'm sure there's probably a part, within the set and actually filming where, things get changed and, maybe the script does, or something happens where, on paper it sounds really good and we love it. But, once we actually see the interactions and what's going
Mm.
on with the set too, that could be probably changed as well. So how do you kind of take that idea and really, work and negotiate with those sorts of changes?
Often we like to create environments that are as full and real and as enclosed as possible, so the actor really can get into character and feel like they are actually there, and it's like, not doesn't feel fake. And then they have the freedom to ad lib and sort of roam around, but usually everything's sort of shot listed, and they know where they're supposed to go, and they know what they're supposed to touch. But oftentimes, like on the show I'm on now, there's a lot of things like special effects, and it's like, okay, well, that is rigged to fall, so there has to be a winch on the other side of the wall, and that means that there's three guys standing there with like a pulley system, and they have to have another guy with a safety, and then there's another guy over there with a fire extinguisher, because what if the candle catches on fire? Like, everything is quite choreographed. You would be really surprised the depth of meanings we have about who's supposed to be where, how it's supposed to be done. And sometimes we have to get like fire safety. There's like real firemen there, or police, just to make sure that we're doing it right.
Yeah, yeah. I
So
can't even imagine, just the full extent of everything because, like you said, everything has to be so planned out because you never know, what's really going to happen once it happens. And
yeah.
even just like the chain of events that go to produce the whole thing. So,
Oh,
and you talked a little bit about, budget within that. And I'm really interested to see how that plays a role with your decisions for materiality and color schemes and all of that, and really just like, how do you take that into consideration, but also try to produce the best final product? Because I think something, even in my experience now, is there's kind of like a push and pull, but sometimes, the budget definitely takes over, or, vice versa. How do you kind of go about that?
But it's a good question, because budget is like a constant topic of something that we're always trying to work out. Like, it comes down to having experience to know how bad it could go, and how much something is actually going to cost once if you're reupholstering a whole set of furniture. you know I know how much the fabric is going to cost, how much the time for the seamstress is going to cost, how much then we'll have to paint it and age it, like how much time the painters are going to need. Like, it comes from experience, knowing how to plan. So just like if you were doing the interior decor of a house, or um, putting together an architectural package or lighting plan or whatever, you just need to really plan, and you need to really understand how it could go off the rails, and you have to sort of plan for that. And I try to have a good relationship with the money people, because I don't want any surprises. I don't want my people bringing me invoices that I wasn't prepared for, and I don't want to bring invoices to anybody that they're not prepared for. um, Sometimes I'll create a budget for like a huge space we're gonna do, and I'll submit it, and I'll be like biting my nails, being like, oh my god, I hope they approve it. And then they come back with like a million questions, and sometimes they just need to understand how I got to those numbers. So I try and make it as clear as possible, like this, and this, and this, and you'd be surprised how fast it adds up. And sometimes I have to really defend it. It's like, yes, I need the $10,000 wallpaper because that is going to make the space. You know what I mean? Or sometimes I'll say, okay, no, we don't need the expensive wallpaper because I know I'm going to need expensive something else. So you kind of, and even on bigger shows where there are bigger budgets, you still hit that ceiling pretty quickly, you know? So
Yeah.
you kind of have to be realistic about how quickly it could go off the rails budget wise. And if you don't have the budget, then you have to get really crafty really fast.
Yeah.
And sometimes amazing things can happen when you don't have money, because you can't just go and figure it out just by spending. Sometimes having the money is almost worse, because you have no excuse. Like, just go and buy it then, you've got the money, so, but like, I've done some pretty incredible things with no money, and
Yeah.
create people around. You just have a few little resources and some talented people. It's kind of amazing what you can pull off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, even like you said, if just having the money, it kind of gives you that excuse to say, well, why would I experiment, or why would I kind of look into how a material can be, deformed or changed or manipulated in certain ways,
Right.
rather than just like buying it that way itself. And yeah,
Yeah.
that sort of thing definitely, it can get costly, because you're not only asking for the product at that point, you're also asking for somebody else to manipulate it, which
Right.
also costs money. And it
Time.
just,
Time
like
is.
you said, it just keeps going, and it definitely adds up quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I want to kind of shift gears a little bit and talk more about how you got into your fabrication of hardware, because I feel like, what was that transition like? What did it look like? Were you doing it both? Was there an overlap? Were you really into
Yeah, I'm
set
doing
design?
both right now. I think I was always intrigued with the casting process. So casting bronze, I don't know why it just really appealed to me. It's a crude, archaic, ancient process done, and we do it the same way that it's been done for thousands of years, just in sand molds, right? Something about that was just really cool to me. And I was actually looking for hardware, and I couldn't find anything that I really liked for a specific application. It kind of just stuck with me, and I was like, well, I can make that. So I did an experiment. I made some molds, and I found a foundry to work with locally, and I cast it, and was like, oh my god, I love this. If I love it so much, other people are going to find it awesome too, and they have. And I'm, you know, happy to say that I ship all over the planet.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
And
you know,
what materials do you work with specifically, and how do you kind of manipulate them with the tools that you use, how you fabricate them. Can you talk a little bit about the actual process to make
Yeah,
them?
for sure. So every idea has started with a sketch. I just a little sketchbook, and I was like, okay, I want to make, a series. Like here's I've got a handle right here. One of my series that has done really well is the Pyra series. Sorry, I've got it all wrapped up. And this was I don't know if you see that.
Yeah.
So this shape was sort of inspired by like ancient pyramids, like the step architecture, just kind of that really sort of simple but bold kind of shapes. And that's kind of what my wares have become. They're all very clean line and simple, but there's something bold about them. So everything started with a sketch. I was on an airplane coming home from vacation, and this shape just sort of came to me, and I just drew it. And then I worked with a mold maker who helped me make the molds for the actually I did some computer renderings of it myself, sort of crudely came up with the shape, and then I had a tool maker, I had a mold maker make the mold for me, and then I took it to a foundry, and I don't actually pour the bronze myself, but they do it there into my molds, and then I take the hardware and I have it finished from there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it goes
It's
through.
it's such an interesting process, like, to me,
Yeah.
because I think a lot of the times people, whether they're in design or they're just they don't have any affiliation with that fields,
Mm-hmm.
and they really don't take into consideration how hardware can really change the look or the aesthetic or the feel of the items that they want. You know what I mean? I think a lot of the times people subconsciously kind of maybe acknowledge that, where they look at a desk or a drawer or something, and they say,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I like it, but it's not quite right, and they just don't ask themselves, like, why isn't it right?
Yeah.
You know what I
Well,
mean?
exactly. I mean, yeah, you can transform something with something as simple as a bronze handle, right? But it's also about interacting with something that is beautiful to touch. For me, that's a big part of it. It's very tactile, and the bronze is just like, I don't know if you can see it. It's just nice, it's heavy, it's solid, it's soft, it's textured, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
I love it. And so for me, it's about that. It's also about on the daily basis. How many times a day do you touch your kitchen cabinets or your drawers or your things? And it can have an impact on your day.
Yeah.
For me,
Absolutely.
I mean, it would sound silly, but I like beautiful things. I like beautiful materials. I love cashmere. I love bronze. I want to touch the things that feel good in my hand.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's what definitely connects people with the items that are in their homes. You know what I mean? So just like you said, you are constantly touching your cabinets every day. You have to eat, so you have to get the plates or the dishware that
Yeah.
are from them. And I think people don't necessarily consider how that will affect them, specifically materiality. So like you said, the softness of the metal, how does that affect their overall feel for the day? So it's just like a space. If you're in a space that makes you feel uncomfortable, or it's just those are then the finer details, which I completely agree, which they
Mhm.
make or break a design,
Mhm.
because it's all about the total process of it, and every single thing that goes into it is so important. But I think a lot of the time people don't consider that, and they kind of just they overlook it most of the
Yeah,
time.
some people do, and some people totally get it, and they're willing to, spend a little more for something that has some soul and has a story, and is a bit of a throwback to a different time, which the my hardware kind of is.
Yeah.
So some people get it, and some people don't, and the people who don't, that's cool too. They do their own thing,
Yeah.
right? Not for everybody. Yeah.
So where are you looking to take your hardware? Is it something that you really want to implement more so within, set design and that realm that you work with as well? Or is there something that, you really want to invest more time into?
For me, the TV work and the hardware are two separate things, or like two different babies that I have, and I both of them demand a lot of me, and I'm able to do that. So And with COVID, it's been weird. I have people who help me in the hardware, but I was going to bring in a full-time person to help me, and I just didn't do that because I still house the stuff and work from my house. So it's just weird. I haven't really done that, but business has picked up more since COVID because people are just renovating like mad right now. So I'm shipping more hardware than I thought I would be, and the business is growing. I do want to continue growing. I want to add to the offerings and have various. Right now, I have 4 series, 4 lines of wares. I want more. I want to be able to offer more and different options and different sizes and different things. And I have other products I want to create outside of hardware. Um, so I just want to continue the growth. You know what? Would love to see where it can take off too. If I spent more time and energy on it, I think it could really be a large company one day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's something that can definitely come full circle. You know what I mean? Because you have such a big array of space through set design and all of that. But, taking it from such a broad context and then working down to the finer details, I think it really just makes everything come together so nicely. And I think that's why your work is so successful and exciting, is because you completely understand, from the big picture down to the little techniques, and why can, this little, like, quote unquote little thing make or break the space, or really add to the aesthetic or whatever you're trying to achieve.
Oh, for
So
sure.
I'm just really excited, and I cannot wait to see what else you produce,
Oh,
because I'm so excited.
hey, that's awesome. That's awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the hardware. I'll keep growing it and making stuff, and yeah, hopefully it resonates with people.
Yeah. What other products do you think you might consider creating? Like, would you ever dabble more into like furniture or anything
Um,
a little bit larger in that scale?
I think probably not, just because going right now, like, I deal with things that are this big. There's a knob. I mean, I've got a million of them over there, but um, I still need to keep things small physically because going big means bigger production, bigger space, bigger warehouse, bigger, 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 and that's kind of not where I'm at. I would love more volume of the small things,
Mhm.
more hardware, like I say. I'm sort of branching out into like things like hooks and maybe some like serving plates and stuff like that, like platters or things related to adding texture to a space and adding a little bit of that old world soul. But so I don't think about furniture.
Yeah.
Although I do love upholstering things. And my biggest secret, here's the big secret for your for your production. Sometimes if you can't afford the fabric and you can't afford to hire a seamstress, just paint it. You would not believe what you can get away with paint on fabric. If you see a couch
Oh,
and it's pink and you want it to be blue, just paint it.
wow. Yeah.
Latex or whatever paint, like trust me, you would believe the stuff we've done with just paint.
Yeah, that's very surprising to hear, but also something, I feel like that's one of those things where you definitely can think about doing something like that, but it just seems like, you know, you just don't think of it right off the
Right,
bat. You know what I mean?
right.
It's such, and that's the interesting thing about it, right? The whole context of what we were talking about is like doing things and manipulating materials and fabrics to see how they are, because my
Yeah.
next question was gonna be like, how important do you think tactile working is? Which I definitely probably already know the answer, because
For me, it's
we've been
huge. Yeah.
exactly, yeah.
I'm just that person. I'm that person that needs to see a fabric. I can't look at a photo and approve something that way. I need to touch it. I need to see how it reacts in the light. And in my home environment, everything is quite tactile. Like I like texture. I think texture creates like a vibe or a soul, or you know what I mean? Like sometimes I go into very sterile or really modern, uber modern environments, and I don't react well to them because for me that's not enough to bounce off of. You need to sort of interact with things, even if you're not touching it. You can get a sense for a material from a distance, and for me, I get drawn in where there's patina and texture and etching and like just the variance in reaction to light or to shadow or all of those things. So for me it's huge.
Yeah, absolutely. It's sort of just taking consideration of all the stimulation that you're going to receive. So it's not just touch. Like, I mean, that might be one of the largest ones, but I think people don't realize how, you know, visual sensory of looking at a wallpaper and saying like, okay, well, if I can visualize the fact that, you know, there's, you know, different pieces or materials that make up that fabric, you know, it changes their whole like outlook on a space, and really it connects them with it. You know what I mean? So it's not just looking at, you know, like you said, like a modernized space that's totally flat and colorless and, you know, has like an overall aesthetic, but it just doesn't have that personal connection to it.
Yeah. And everybody's different, right? That doesn't mean it's the right way to do things. It's just
Right.
who I am. That's what I react to, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, was there anything, you know, growing up within design and the arts that you like can look back on now and say, you know, I wish I knew that back then to kind of, you know, help myself now?
Hmm. I think if anything, when I was a student, I was kind of rushing through the student thing. Like I just wanted to get out into the world, make money, and you know, I felt like the school part of it was kind of a formality that I could just breeze through and like. But looking back now, that as a person who's been in the work field for a while, I would give anything to be in a learning environment again and just be able to take the time and to like dive into something and like really get to know that part of myself or just learn. Like you know, I think I would have enjoyed the school part more
Yeah.
early on in the design world that I was part of. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that's still relevant today. You know, students are just so concerned with getting out into the profession that they take advantage of certain, you know, applications and, you know,
And
abilities at school.
yeah.
Like, for example, digital fabrication is something that I know once I leave school, I probably won't have that much access to in
Oh
the
yeah.
real world unless I purchase,
Pay for
you
it.
know,
Yeah.
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 So exactly. And I think that's something, you know, to consider too. And I'm also intrigued to know if you've ever dabbled within any sort of like 3D fabrication or digital fabrication
Mhm.
through CNC printer, CNC routers,
Mhm.
laser cutters, 3D printers, and
3D
how does
print-
that kind of change the game?
Yeah, sometimes some of my ideas I 3D print before I make them into like the real proper molds, or take 3D print and have it um, replicated and then made into a bigger mold, so you can see the object in real space, you know, and then you can like, oh yeah, no, it should be an inch thinner or an inch taller, or I don't like that, or you know, so it's
Yeah.
pretty exciting for sure. It's like taking an idea and making it three-dimensional. It's kind of super cool.
Yeah. And it's so necessary to do that, right? Because like you said, you don't realize, you know, how looking at it in your
Mhm.
hands can really, you know, affect that process. Because I mean, it's easy to look at it on the computer or, you know, look at it
Yeah,
in a sketch and be like, yes, that's amazing. That's exactly what we want. But
yeah,
until it's actually built, it
yeah.
totally changes
Although I think
everything.
there's something to be said for being able to build stuff with your hands too, and like connecting to the design and the shapes that way. But not everybody's like that. I'm like that. I studied ceramics in art college, so it was like, I'm like, again, I'm very tactile. I like want to get my hands in there and play with it, you know. So but that's just a personal thing. So sometimes I'll
No,
start whittling something, or I'll be like, get some Sculpey and just play with it and see what I can do. Or like, the other day I got some 2-part moldable epoxy and I was sculpting it like as it was drying. I'm like, oh no, it's drying, just to see what I could do, and then maybe I could sand it, and then maybe it would take a texture really easily. Like I don't know, I was just playing. I think that's important too. CD
no,
three
it's
and all that stuff is valid, but sometimes you just got to get in there, you know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's so important. And that just speaks volumes to like actually, like you said, actually acknowledging the process that it takes to make it. Because
Yeah,
it even kind of connects the idea that we were talking about earlier about how, you know, like for example, like with a budget, you know, it's easy to tell somebody, well, no, we we can get rid of that because it's not necessary or something. It kind of goes along the lines of, something to that extent where it's like, it's very easy for people to say, this is my design now, this is your job now, you go
Right.
and make it. But until you build it yourself, like,
Yeah.
you don't know, like,
Yeah.
the hard work and dedication it is to actually make that. And like,
Right.
there's times too where you might receive a project from somebody else and that you have to kind of build, and you have to tell them, like, this isn't actually realistic, or,
Yeah.
it doesn't work like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Or it's not replicatable, or you can't. Yeah, exactly. It's good to know processes and materials so you can speak to those things.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So is there anything else today that you want to talk about, whether in set design or, even the schooling aspect of it, or through hardware? Because I know there's, so I guess one last question that I might have is, how do you kind of advocate for, set design and other fields within architecture and design itself? Because I think, like we talked about today, is there's a lot of, mainstream thinking of, I'm going to go to school for architecture, or I'm going to go to school for interior design or whatnot. And, I'm going to come out as that. I don't
Right.
think a lot of students realize how many avenues and options there are for them that, just an example like you going to school for, whatever your heart desires, then coming out and saying, I might want to change my mind, or I might have gone to school for architecture, but I actually want to do this.
Yeah.
How did they kind of?
I think you got to keep an open mind and just follow the things that make you happy. So you might go to school for a certain position and then you start doing it and you hate it. Just keep an open mind and be flexible, because you never know where one avenue or where one person or where one opportunity is going to take you. I never knew I'd be a set decorator, a set designer, production designer. I didn't know that. I didn't set out to do that. It just, 30 years later, it kind of happened. you know, Keep an open mind and just follow the joy. It's kind of a
Yeah.
cliche, but it's true. Follow the things that give you satisfaction and you feel are cool. And usually, if you love it, then you will probably be good at it, and then people will see that and hire you for it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And where can our viewers reach you and your work,
So
whether it's through social media or online?
Yeah, so I'm pretty active on Instagram, although I haven't been much lately. But you can find me at Shayne Fox Hardware. That's for the hardware business. And you can check out the hardware there. And I have a website for my film work. It's Shayne Fox Design,
Awesome.
ShayneFoxDesign.com. And there's
Perfect.
at Shayne Fox on Instagram. So you can find me there. And then websites and all those things that just be linkable. Yeah.
Awesome. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for
No problem.
meeting with us and speaking with us today at a student's perspective. I had such a great conversation, and I really think this gives such insight into the field of works that you do.
Yeah,
So,
cool. Well,
thank
thank you
you.
for having me. And I can't wait to watch the playback and see how dorky I am.
Yeah. No, thank you everyone at home for watching. This was another episode of A Student's Perspective. Find us next week as the conversation continues.